Very excited to have Mr. Dan Smith with us. For our 30th year, we wanted positive energy. We wanted to look forward to the future in a positive and inspiring way, and I'm sure that's what you're going to find from Dan. He's a social entrepreneur. He has worked at the Liberty Science Center and the Cattery Environmental Center, and you can read all about him in your book. I'm very pleased to welcome, and please join me in welcoming Mr. Dan Smith.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. I am very pleased and honored to be here with you today. What I'm going to do is talk about what I like to call closing circles. You are all into the ecology and environment, so you understand that life is a big circle, that it doesn't run in a straight line like we think it does sometimes. And what I'm going to do is talk about my talk, I put it in a little system diagram here for you. So the first thing we're going to do is, we're going to jump off the cliff. It's going to be scary, but we're not going to spend too much time on it because we all know how scary the world is. All right, and then we're going to spend some time down in here in the little pool at the end. And then we're going to wander back up through and then go through it again. And hopefully through this, there probably won't be anything new that you learn. What I'm hoping is that to share my perspective with you on how things could be and what your role can be in that. And I want you to try to refrain from value judgments because I'm going to say some things that might seem kind of crazy. But we'll talk about it in a systems and an ecological perspective, and hopefully it'll make more sense. And I'm going to argue that for 30 years you guys have been outside and advocating everybody get outside. I'm going to advocate that you get outside also, but not in the way that you think. Okay, so we all know that the world is scary. You look at the news, you read the newspapers, you observe the world around you, you know that it gets depressing. There's a lot of things out there that are wrong. And I'm not going to go through too many of them. But just to give you a little bit of flavor, we'll jump off the cliff. So this is one of my favorite slides right here, and favorite, it's kind of a weird word. But so this is the Arctic sea ice projected and actual. This one here is another good one. This is from the New Jersey Sustainable State Institute, and this is a projection of New Jersey greenhouse gas emissions. And what they did was they looked at a policy and tried to come up with all the policies they could possibly think of to change greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the super aggressive policy scenario. And once they got to 2020, no matter what they ran, it wouldn't, it just kept creeping back up about the same that it would have. Here's the 2020 target that was set out by the New Jersey government. This is where they say we need to be in order to, kind of hold off the worst of climate change. And literally, they have no idea. They call it the gap. No idea what to do here. Okay? So, my last scary slide. This one's kind of funny, but it was a real paper presented at a conference. And in it, they argued that pretty much the normal channels are not going to work. That we have to, this guy was basically advocating for scientists to get involved in direct action, which is the only way to stop the system. That's understood. Okay. So, think about this as like a little pool, okay? We just dove off the cliff, we were scared, screaming the whole way down. Now we're in the pool, it's different. We stop moving, we're floating, it's much nicer. And we can talk about things and look at it ecologically, look at things from a systems perspective, which you all know. So we'll just walk through a couple of things right now that are kind of human systems that are kind of problems, quote unquote. So we're here together, gather our strength to go out and kind of fight the enemy. We all know what's at stake. So this slide here was a real eye-opener for me. I was trained in climate science by Al Gore and did the Inconvenient Truth presentations. Did probably 24 of them until I got sick of the guy in the back going, yeah, but what about? And I said, you know what? It's not my job to convince you. If you want to talk about solutions, let's talk. Because guess what? Solutions that are good for one thing, if they're real solutions, they're good for a lot of other things too. But what I noticed was that if you look at this, without knowing that it was a picture of the atmosphere, which you probably all knew, it looks like a straight line, right? And to me, I was like, you know what, that's kind of how we look at the world. the systems are so big that we think they're straight lines, but they're actually not. They're just really big systems, but you only have a limited perspective. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is recognizing that we all have a perspective and that it's not invalid, but it's one perspective. Right? So we're going to wander back through here and we're going to talk about three specific things: food, energy, and water. If you're really looking at kind of crisis situation and you're looking at sustainability of systems, I think it's important to talk about food, we all need it, energy because we need it to do just about everything else that we do, and water because we need that to survive also. So just briefly, we all know the food system, there's lots of problems, lots of things going on with it. You know, this is carbon pollution by what you eat, stuff we all know. Food safety, lots of issues with that. It's an endless barrage of the news of things that are wrong and going bad. But the problem is that these are only snapshots. They don't represent the whole system. This is another one that I think is instructive. This is an energy flow diagram. And the big red arrow at the top is actually their losses. So on the one side here, you put in all of these things: coal, oil, natural gas, renewables, nuclear, everything. And in the conversion of these fuels into what we need, we actually lose more than half. Now we know in ecology you really can't lose anything. It changes form and it goes someplace else. But from our kind of flat earth human perspective, it's lost. But really we know that it's a missed opportunity. And in nature, loss is from a single organism perspective. It's not from the total ecological perspective. Another little chart here, U.S. Household energy use. You can see half of this is heating and cooling. Water heating is another big chunk. Lighting, electronics, things like that. So we use energy in our houses, and I want to try to focus on homes a little bit, just because it's more relevant to us. It's not as big and scary as industry or things we don't have control of. We all work in houses or buildings that are like houses. We live in houses, so it's instructive to know that. So we went through briefly on a couple of things, and I didn't want to bore you with how to do this because we all know. So what I was talking about just a minute ago about perspective, when you look at things as an organism, like I do, an organism, like there's things that I eat and there's things that I excrete, and the two don't mix. When they do, you get in trouble. But you know that from a total ecological perspective, there's nothing that's excreted by one that's not eaten by another. Right? If you look at a tree and you say, oh, the tree died, we all know that the tree has more life in it when it's dead than when it's alive, because all the organism it feeds. It all depends on perspective. Okay? That's one thing that we're lacking as a society, and I think that this group is perfectly poised to be able to help people see the larger systems and circles, not just our linear placing. So instead of jumping off the cliff again, why don't we change perspective a little? Let's look at it as a system. Look at it from a different way. So now instead of jumping off the cliff, we're going to kind of walk along a little path and just kind of observe things a little bit to see what comes up. So when we take an ecological perspective, and I'm going to advocate that you guys do a lot of things here that you may not consider to be strictly kind of environmental ed, but I think the world is changing, and we're at a point right now where we really do need to apply ecology, not just teach about it. And this is a cover of a permaculture book. I'm sure you've all heard of permaculture. I encourage you to have at least one person on your staff be a certified permaculture designer. Go through it, learn it, make your places, whole systems, not just linear. Another big piece of the puzzle in terms of ecological thinking versus kind of flat earth human thinking, I think, is our food and aquaponics. It's a great example of a food system that is more productive because it is hooked together than it is separate. And business and industry are starting to figure this out. People are starting up small businesses, doing lots of things. But there's still not a general awareness that is an ecological truth. The fish are in the water, they poop in the water. Plants don't see it as poop. For them it's food, right? For them, they like it, it's good. So the water circulates back into the plants. The plants grow, clean the water from the fish's perspective. To them, they take it all out, and that water is no good in the aquaponic system. It goes back into the fish thrive. It's a system that's hooked up together. And both systems literally are more productive because they're hooked up together than if they were separate. Another thing is just food and how we have our lives separated from food production. So this was a slide from a competition for students where they tried to imagine Philadelphia as a farm, basically. So they came up with different slides to show, oh, these are my chickens. My chickens, too. So they looked at the city and looked at all the open space and thought, what can we do with that space? Now, granted, it's a little out there. You can't just go have cows walk around in Philadelphia. But I think the role for environmental educators today is not necessarily to do all these things. It's to teach the children so that they understand the rules well enough so that they would get older, they can solve these problems. All right? Because the issue is that we really don't know what to do. People will tell you what to do. They'll say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, but we know that they're not real solutions. They're part of the solution, but there isn't. We don't have that gap figured out yet. As an example, I see the Sustainable Schools is here. Great organization, great work. Sustainable State, same thing. There are a lot of municipalities. I think most of them now have signed on to do the Green Pledge, where they have policy recommendations to follow through on that will help green the operations. It's a huge part of the answer, but it's not the answer. Most of the municipalities have signed up. If everybody did everything that they're advocating, we'd be better, but I think it's relative. You know, we're still in the mindset of minimizing bad. You know, we want to reduce our carbon footprint. We want to reduce the amount of meat that we eat. We want to reduce. Forget it. Reduce is the wrong focus. We need to maximize. That's what nature does, right? Would you ever find a rainforest that's saying, oh, well, you know, we need to reduce. There's too much diversity here. There's too much density. You can't have that. No. More and more. It's the way nature works. It's the way we need to think as people and as teachers to teach the kids to think that way so that when they go through, they can learn these things. Another example of waste. This was in a local dumpster. Took this picture. There's a lot of bananas there. It's just throw them out because it's waste. From their perspective, they're in a store, things come in, things go out. If it doesn't go out in a certain amount of time, they throw it out. Now, yesterday, actually this is Yankee Stadium. I thought this was great too. They had a food waste bin in Yankee Stadium. I was so happy. Then I looked inside. It was, it was cups and it was napkins and maybe a hot dog or two, but there really wasn't much in there. But yesterday, I was in Manhattan and I saw this. And this really excited me. This is a bin that was at a farmer's market, and the farmer market people with their little booths selling vegetables were collecting food scraps. So people in New York City coming out of their buildings, going to the farmer market, dumping, and there was probably 15 or 20 of these bins, dumping their food waste into the bins to be taken back to the farm to be composted. Now, that's what we need on an exponential scale. Now, how many people here compost at home? How many people here compost at work? Good. We need to compost everything. Everything. It's one of the most basic ways that we can teach the systems and cycles for kids. Everything needs to be composted. And ultimately, there is no such thing as waste. And again, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know that. But when I say you need to get outside, what you really need to do is not get out into the woods. You need to go into a building, and you need to go outside your field. There are so many people that are talking about things right now, trying to figure out how to solve problems, and they don't know the basic rules of ecology. If there is anything that you're interested in, I don't care what it is, go to a meeting, raise your hand, ask a question. The knowledge is really needed, a lot. I went to a combined sewer overflow meeting the other day. Combined sewers, when it rains, basically the poop goes into the local waterway. Not a great system, but when they were built 100 years ago, it was a lot better because you used to throw it out the window. So it was a big improvement from that. But now there's 21 municipalities in the state that have combined sewer overflows. So when it rains, water and sewage is discharged into the water. And now the state has come up with they call long-term control plans, where they are trying to get these municipalities, saying you have 20 years, you have to come up with a plan to stop this. It's great. And when the municipalities go, oh, we can't do this, too expensive, blah, blah, they say, okay, you have 25 years. So they're taking a hard line on it, which is good. And the kinds of solutions that they're coming up with are also good, but the amount of water that we're talking about is so phenomenal that it's really hard to even think about it in terms of a small-scale, truly sustainable system organization. And we heard things like people building giant underground tunnels to hold stormwater. In Washington, D.C., they're going down 200 feet, and they're building a 10-mile-long tunnel that's 50 or 75 feet high, I forget, to hold stormwater. You know how much that's going to cost? A tunnel underground to hold stormwater, because the water discharges, the stormwater goes into the sewage system, and it overflows into the, into the bays and creeks, and they want to stop it, and that's their solution. What's good was that over half of the agenda was on green infrastructure, so that was really good. But still, I'm sitting there in a room full of engineers and town planners, and I'm just like, I need to plant some grass. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? They got it, and they knew that they had to do it, and they were looking at it like, okay, well, if I put in this little, I don't know, this green thing here, this garden, whatever that is, if I put that in, I get points to go on my long-term control plan, and that'll, get me off the hook. That's how they're looking at it. But you guys would recognize the opportunity that is, because they're spending millions and billions and billions of dollars. One example, Perth Amboy, this was a different meeting, but Perth Amboy has to replace their entire water infrastructure. And they said it was going to cost about $1 billion. Right? Perth Amboy, $1 billion to rebuild their infrastructure. And they have to do it, they think, because of this combined sewer overflow. Which brings me to our next slide. This is a company that started about 5 years ago. It's called Natural Event. Great title. They provide temporary restrooms at concerts and festivals and things like that. And guess what they do with the poop? They compost it. Yeah. Yeah. Now, how many people here have composting toilets? Either where they work or a couple. I think that's something, and I don't have one. One, I don't have one. This is something else that we need to do. And I think this is probably the perfect way to get ecological concepts across to people. And I really like the concert venue piece. Because it's not, oh, you have to put a composting toilet in your house or something like that. That's a huge leap for people. But if you're at a concert and you have to go to the bathroom, you know that there's really nothing worse than a porta potty. There really isn't. I mean, blue water, the whole 9 yards, the whole thing is terrible. And they have very nice looking composting toilets, and people, they have lavender and things like that. But what a way to introduce people to the concept that waste is an individual organism's perspective. I mean, frankly, if something is shit, there's nothing worse. It's like that's the word that defines the worst thing you could possibly have, right? So if you can challenge people fundamentally that there is no such thing as shit, it depends on your perspective. It depends on where you are. And forget about, the whole, go run the list. Topsoil's eroding, farms are disappearing, all of these other things. Now all of a sudden, if you can close this loop, and there's a lot of, and it's scary, I know, there's lots, but there are studies out there that show that properly composted human manure is safe to use on vegetable crops. And there's actually some pretty good evidence too that people who way back before kind of modern civilization, people and villages and tribes that composted their own fruits and vegetables with their own composted excrement. Something happened, I don't remember exactly, but with closing the nutrient cycle, they actually were healthier. Now, ecologically, we can see how that would make sense, right? Still scary, believe me, because what do you mean you put poop on the, people don't even like poop at all. Forget about putting it on the vegetables. Right? But what I'm talking about are fundamental things that we need to do now so that, what's the old adage? The best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago? This is 20 years ago for 2035. Right? There's stuff that we need to do. This one here, this is another kind of interesting poop-related project. This is a methane digester. And you all know that, in the wetlands or the swamps that it smells, right? That's from the anaerobic digestion, composting that goes on there. Well, this little device here, and it's all, homemade one, does that and captures the gas. What a great project. Right? This one is actually a village scale one that was built in, I think it was in India. And they actually call it feeding the cow, feeding the village cow. Because when they feed, or the village feeds their human waste, their vegetable matter, everything into the digester, and they get to cook from the gas. And I don't know exactly the conversions or what you have to put in to what you get out, but as a process, as a closed loop, we know from ecology that it makes sense. It makes sense to do that. And then you can compost what's left. This one here is very interesting. This is a house that was actually an apartment building. It was built back in the 80s in Germany. And it has something like 135 trees planted inside the building. It looks like a mess, but it's one of the biggest tourist attractions in the city. I forget what city it was. But you start to think about it, and why do we create life vacuums in our place? Like, is there a single plant in here? No, there's not. And believe me, if there was a spider on this desk, I'd probably squish it. It would. But why do we do that? Why do we separate ourselves from nature? It's the default position. And we need to not be apart from nature. We need to be a part of nature. Okay? And this is what we have to get across to the kids. If you think about what a green building is, or a greenhouse, this is in Disney World. This is just kind of, like a picture, that was fun. There's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for what we can do. And it's not just putting solar panels on a house. We know that there's a lot of things that can be gained from incorporating the natural rhythms and cycles and systems into our built environments. Now this one here, this is kind of cool. This is a termite mound. And somebody took a termite mound and looked at the flows, how they're built, where they take the cool air in and the hot air rises out, refreshes the air, it's insulation. And architects are starting to think like that. They're starting to look at things in terms of natural energy flows, so passive solar design. I mean, it's not like it was back in the early 80s when things were really kind of rolling and then stopped. But we are coming back to it. And I think we all really need to focus on this and look at it. I don't think it's about teaching about the grasshopper or the bird. It's about teaching the systems and cycles that are present in everyday life and how to incorporate them to human advantage. And of course, there's all kinds of examples of human and natural systems that have the same patterns and things. I mean, the lungs look like the mound, look like a tree. We know that stuff. We need to highlight it. So this is a rainwater collection system. Does anybody have rain barrels at their place where they are? Less than half? Okay. Another huge area. And this one, what I like about this is this kind of has everything kind of inverted. And that's what I think we need to do in terms of environment and being environmental educators. It's not about trying to be included on the outskirts. Because you're all professionals. You've been in this for a long time. Maybe you're just starting. You're committed. But to most people, the environment, the kids go on a field trip. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. We need to turn that 180 degrees. It needs to be central. And that's why when you listen to Missy and to Michael tomorrow, they're going to talk more about the rules, about the specific things that schools are tasked with teaching kids. And you're going to figure out how to incorporate that into what you do. What I'm suggesting is that you need to have the environment as the integrating context. Everything needs to be done from the environment with the environmental rules in place and highlighted. And you look on the web, there's a million different examples of rainwater systems. This guy uses it to water his garden. There's rain barrels, you can plug them together. This is one that we had a Boy Scout build at Cattery Environmental Center. And one of the interesting things about water is that most people don't recognize how much water there really is. If you think about, like just for example, with this project, it was a Boy Scout that built it as part of his Eagle Scout. And we have a carriage house it's pretty big, but it's not a huge building, one building. And I challenged him to catch all of the rainwater that came off of one side of the building, because that's where we had the piping set up. So he does his calculations, he comes back the next week and he says, it's impossible. It's impossible. Improbable, I'll buy it. But impossible, no, because there's a number. You know, like, what's the number? Go back, figure it out, what's the number? Because I want every job, was my kind of take. So he comes back and he says, to capture a half-inch of rain, we would need 35 55-gallon drums. Half-inch of rain on one building. So we got 6. Yeah. And pretty much, if there was a sprinkle, they filled up. Is the system perfect? No. Is it a demonstration? Yes. Will it help kids that see it think, ooh, what's that? Is it related to STEM? Sure. Another one, big cube. The way we typically deal with water as environmental educators is through wetlands and wet areas. This is actually a constructed wetland. So specifically designed to be an ecological space that would handle stormwater. Now, you may not have the resources to do a major wetland restoration, you know, a constructed wetland project. But that doesn't mean that you can't do something. You may not be able to do something like this. You might be able to do something like this. You might be able to do something like this. It's all about the process of slowing things down and showing the kids how everything is done. Small projects that are hands-on, that involve technology, that are kind of project-based, interdisciplinary. A lot of this stuff you guys have been doing for 30 years. I mean, the environmental movement is really the original systems thinkers. What I'm suggesting is that that needs to be the context within which all of this other stuff happens. It's one of the things that I'm involved with now. I'm helping other smaller organizations get involved in the STEM kind of after-school space. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of different people looking to get into it. And they're doing really cool things. Like this one guy, he has this class where he builds these like mechanical monkeys. Then they have a little thing, they go with their arm and they go across a rope. It's fun, it's cool. The kid builds the monkey does the little thing. He actually took it a step further and the kids hack the monkey. And they bring in an old birthday card with the, you open up and sings a song. So they cut that out and hack the monkey so that now the monkey, when he goes on the roof, he sings a song. That's really cool. And it's important. But what I'm suggesting is we need to think of those types of things that integrate into the environment, that highlight those things. And a great way to do that is with solar hot water and solar electricity. This is a solar hot water backyard thing. Somebody built it. You all know that water heats up when it's in the sun. How many people use it to their advantage? Does anybody have a solar hot water system? Okay, 1, 2, maybe. I was told by a very smart guy that solar hot water was the most important, least sexy application of solar. This is actually kind of cool too. Again, these are all small projects that you can do. You can do these in your environmental center. You can teach kids about process and also teach them how to integrate into the environment. This is an air conditioner. So it's a bucket it's insulated, and this actually is not water. It's a streamer, so you can tell when it's on. But they take a gallon of water, freeze it, put it in the bucket, fan on top, and the fan blows on the bucket, which lowers the temperature of the air, so that the water can change from a solid to a liquid, and pushes colder air out. And they said that 1 gallon of frozen water can stay frozen or can last in this little air conditioner for 6 hours. How cool is that? It's a fan. You're freezing a thing of water. And this is a very achievable project. There's nothing huge about this. Solar ovens. Anybody have a solar oven? Right, handful. Okay. Another one. Very, very important application. And again, it's not that we are looking to cook every meal in a solar oven. My view Because your job right now is to expose children to these things so that when they grow up, it's a no-brainer. You know, like if you think about when seatbelts were first introduced, people just had cars. You know, so they were all excited about having a car. Then you put a seatbelt on. And frankly, this is where I felt with the climate change education. Because when you accept that a seatbelt will work, you don't have to know all the science behind physics and impact studies and all this other stuff to know that it's really bad. You just wear your seatbelt. And I think that's where we're locked in with society. We're so set into explaining to everybody how bad it is. No, you don't really understand. It's really, really bad because X, Y, Z. We know it's bad. Stop it. Stop talking about how bad it is. Talk about what can be done right. And this is one of those things. So this will help the child invent a car seat. Right? When you're looking at, when seatbelts first came out, if somebody came up and said, oh, you know what, I want to build a car seat because babies, they can't fit in the seatbelt and it'll be even better. People would have looked at him like he was crazy. Hey, car seat, get out of here. They weren't even at seatbelt yet. And I guarantee somebody thought of it, but it was too soon. What I'm saying is you guys have to build car seats right now. Build them right now. Even if people don't totally understand what it is or say it's unrealistic, it's so stupid, how are you doing that, blah, blah, blah. It's not. It's really, really important. And you need to capitalize on this whole movement, this whole STEM thing, because the environmental centers are poised to really be a huge part of this. And I think it's through projects like this. Another one, now I know you probably don't have, you can't build a dam like this, but this is a little dam, little hydroelectric power plant that some guy built, and it's a 5-gallon bucket. He built a little turbine out of PVC pipe, and they use it to charge cell phones. Right? I mean, granted, it's in a village in Africa somewhere. But again, there's nothing that would stop you from doing something like this as a demonstration project in your environmental centers. So one of the things that I think is really, really important, and again, take it or leave it, but the way that we've been doing environmental education for 30 years is not as relevant as it was. And I don't know that it's really the right way to go moving forward. And I consider myself an environmental educator. I love being outside. I would be outside rather than inside any day of the week. But I don't think it's instructive for people to think of the environment as, you know, the rainforest or the woods or some natural place, which is generally where we all work. We work in natural environments and we try to show kids how it works and all that other stuff. That's great. But I think it's not the most important thing right now. We need to look at the built environment and look at teaching kids about ecological concepts in the built environment. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the whole reduction, reduce your footprint. Oh, it's too, my carbon footprint is too big, I'm going to get it down, down, down. Forget it. I don't want a small footprint. I want a great big giant footprint. I want like wind turbines and solar ovens and composting toilets and all that stuff. But the world really isn't ready for that, even though that's ultimately the only answer. You can put all the technology you want in that straight line. It's still a straight line. And yes, the Earth is very big, and it's a big giant system, and it can absorb a lot, but you've seen population growth numbers. You've seen woodlands that are decimated by deer. You've seen systems that are not in balance, and we're not in balance. And everything that's out there right now, for the most part, in terms of policy solutions, don't help that. We are going to help that. We are the ones that are going to help bring this new kind of ecological thinking into products, into the way the environment is built, and the way that we do everything. At this combined sewer overflow conference I went to, I asked the question, and I knew the answer before I even asked it, but I felt like it was important to ask it anyway. So it's all planners and engineers, and they're dealing with these long-term control plans and what we're going to do, $1 billion, all this stuff. And I asked what if anybody had done any research into data or possibilities of incorporating composting toilets as part of the solution to this problem. Because if you take the poop out, a combined sewer overflow is no big deal, because there's no sewage, because there's no poop. Guess what the answer was? No, nobody's done that. So I did it, all right? I went home, I looked at the number of households in Perth Amboy, and looked up online what a kind of state-of-the-art composting toilet system would cost. And it's not as easy as this, but, and they could install a composting toilet in every single dwelling in Perth Amboy for 1/3 of the cost of replacing the entire water system. 1/3 of the cost. And forget about all the other benefits that would come from that, right? So, but asking the question, they were just, what are you talking about? It was so far afield because they're in it. It's like asking the people that are in the oil industry, well, what about solar? I mean, literally, renewables, if you take out hydro, renewables are this much. That's why they say drill, drill, drill. The numbers are astounding. You can't solve it on a national level like that. It's impossible. Well, it's not impossible, it's improbable, but I think that in 20 years, or 30 years, or 40 years, I think we can do it. I think that's what we all need to do. So the other part of this is that we have to remember that just because something was, doesn't mean it will be. We know the world changes. We know that, and the people who have worked in the same place for many years, you know that nothing is static. It all changes. It's just really slow, right? Because that's our individual organismal perspective, that it's slow. We only see this little chunk. But you know ultimately, from studying ecology, you know that everything changes. It's always moving. Even water that's trapped in the Arctic ice. Move faster than we would like, maybe, but for the most part, it stays there for like tens of thousands of years. It's not fast moving like in a stream or an ocean or in a cloud. But we know it's still water, and we know it's a part of that system. So I think that the biggest thing for me, what I wanted to get across to you, was that I don't want you to think about STEM the way everybody else is thinking about STEM. Come at it from an ecological perspective, from a systems perspective, from the way that you spend your life teaching. Environmental educators are the original systems thinkers. You were doing interdisciplinary work way before it was even called interdisciplinary. You were just teaching about the world around you. And that's how we need to think. So when you listen to Michael and to Missy, think about it from that perspective. Think about the rules, yes, because that's what you have to operate within. You have to operate within the rules because that's how you talk to administrators, that's how you sell your programs to accomplish their goals, because they're all stuck in their piece of the system, and they have their goals that they have to reach. Your job is to position yourself as the no-brainer. And I think that environmental educators and environmental centers really have potentially a lock on this. If not us, who? Really? Nobody knows anything about it. They don't know. They think that, oh yeah, life's a circle, life's dead, blah, blah, blah. But they don't get it. They don't know how to think like that. We do. So when I say get outside, you have to get outside your comfort zone, you have to get outside your profession, and you have to get involved in all these other things. Because I'm telling you, all of these guys sitting around scratching their head about constructed wetlands and about rain gardens and all these other things, they're going to do it one way or another. Hopefully they'll do it better if we're involved. Hopefully it'll work. So with the infrastructure that's already in place, with all the knowledge and expertise and contacts that you guys have, imagine an environmental center that has outdoor programs, that does wonderful things with the environment, and you should always have outside time. But if you integrate it into the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, by demonstrating those concepts through small, do-it-yourself projects, I think it's the way to go. And I don't think anybody else is in a position to do it like this. As I mentioned earlier, I'm working with a couple of different groups that are trying to get into that space. And they're making video games, and they're building toys, and they're doing really, really wonderful things. But it's not within the context that I think is most critical at this point right now. And I think you probably agree. And many of you, hopefully, are aware of the study that was done. I think it was the state did it, maybe 10 or 12 or 12 years ago. It's called EIC, Environment as Integrated Context. If you haven't seen it, write it down and look it up, EIC, because it is absolutely phenomenal. The data that they have with what kids learn, with what they retain, across the board was through the roof. And guess what, EIC, environment is integrated context. Guess what? If you teach kids about things that is like involved in the world around them, they remember it better, they learn it better, it means more to them. And they used environment kind of loosely. Sometimes it was a field, sometimes it was a stream or a patch of trees. But it was the surrounding environment. It was the buildings, it was the infrastructure, it was the whole environment. I met with a group yesterday that's doing similar work with buildings and bridges. There are architects and engineers that are helping to teach math through looking at bridges and buildings and things like that. And that's absolutely phenomenal. And I encourage them to take the next step and to not just recreate what is, but also integrate environmental concepts and ecological concepts to build new things. Because when you have a kid that comes through and did something when they were a kid, are they going to be more likely or less likely to be able to go that far or further in the future? They're going to go further. When I was at Liberty Science Center, I worked with a group that did, the kids built an electric car. Took an old Volkswagen, took everything out, put a bunch of batteries in it, built an electric car. And this was the program for the kids that were going to get kicked out of school, too, by the way. Right? My favorite kids. Well, a little punkiness to them. They're not bought into the current system, so they're all happy to try to create something new and to do something different. But I'll never forget the girl who did the wiring diagram. She was a sophomore in high school. The wiring diagram she drew didn't look like any wiring diagram I'd ever seen. But is that kid more likely or less likely to do something great in the future? I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. So I think, again, to just reiterate, if not us, who? There's no, I mean, we all know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Politicians aren't going to do it. They don't know how to. Industry's not going to do it. They don't know how to. People don't. They're not going to do it. They don't know how to. Frankly, we don't know how to either. But at least we know the rules. Because if there is no waste, you can design a system where there is no waste. You can't take a shower, it's too long. Right? There's no waste. Does a river ever, does a river waste water? No. Water, from a waterfall perspective, well, this is what we have and this is what we lost. Sure. But the entire system, there's no waste. And that's where we need to be. And I think that's where we need to be. And I think we can do it because we have the infrastructure in place. We have the people that have the knowledge. We already have the contacts with everybody. And I think that by taking on small, environmental, highlighting projects, do-it-yourself stuff, have the kids build it. I think that we can not only teach kids about STEM and kind of raise the revenue for our organizations, but really truly save the world. Right? Thank you very much. So I have no idea how much time we have, but anybody have any questions, reactions, thoughts? Yeah.
Do you have the name of the site where the water turbine, where you have the water turbine?
You know what? Okay, I do. If I did it right, I put it in the notes. Yeah, this is the website right here. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it? And if not, I have, on the vast majority of the photographs, I have in the footnotes, where I got them from. But just go on images. This is how I do it. Just go on Google Images, just type something in and see what comes up. Because there's a lot of really interesting things and infinite variety. Other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
Would it be available for us to see when we leave here? Do we have access to see it?
We could probably figure that out. I don't know if there's a way to do it, or I can email it to you. You want it? Mark, is it?
We can put it up on the website. It's okay with you.
Yeah, it's
We can
okay.
see you. Do it. Well, I thought about doing that the whole time.
Yeah, well, we'll get it put online, and so you can have access to it.
So within a certain amount of time, not immediately, but by
Monday.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
The New Jersey School of Conservation has a Phragmites water purification system.
Really?
I'll be giving a workshop about it tomorrow. And I can since 1995, and government approval for releasing into groundwater, which eventually gets to the Blackbrook and to the Delaware River. So there are people systems that are functioning.
That's great. So that was a, I'll tell you what she said. She said that there's a project that was built in 1995 that is a Phragmites water purification system. So that's exciting, and it's on the right track. You know, I mean, as a you know, ultimately, it should, you know, if we had a healthy ecosystem that had birds and everything else, and not, you know, a monocrop. But you know, all this stuff is a step in the right direction, and really, truly, we need to go really fundamental. And it may seem like you're not doing anything because you're not saving the world right now, but I truly believe that we really don't know what the world's going to look like. We don't know. But I think a lot of these things are, if not things that will happen. I mean, this is not just about kids getting good jobs, too. This is about creating the industries of the future. There's a, what was the place that, there was a bunch of guys in Princeton that dropped out and started the worm, Terrasol. Yeah, doing pretty good. Revenue's $2 million, you know, started out with, you know, basically worm, you know, worm juice, you know, from the excretion of the composting process, the vermicomposting. And that's a big company. That's the kind of things we're talking about here. It's not just about getting jobs, it's about creating the industries of the